Good evening, folks. Welcome to another session from the Wise Asylum. The Billionaire Vision. Now, this is interesting. I'll just read this to you because it's a note I've remembered I've got. And just in line with what I was saying before about the Privy Council actually being the cabinet, this is how we need to start looking at it. So this, it says, as A.V. Dicey observed, the cabinet was in theory nothing but a committee of the Privy Council. Yet, the Privy Council, the cabinet, has in reality no dealings, and thus the extraordinary result has taken place, that the government of England is in the hands of men whose position is legally undefined. That while the cabinet is a word of everyday use, no lawyer can say what a cabinet is. That while no ordinary Englishman knows who the Lords of the Council are, the Church of England prays, Sunday by Sunday, that these Lords may be endued with wisdom and understanding. But basically, none of us know who this cabinet really is. But it is, in fact, the Privy Council. Now, I remember Rob B telling me down at a meet in Nottingham that what he'd found was that the Privy Council acted for the absent king. Yeah? We still honour absent king, even though they're bigging him up as the king. He isn't the king. He hasn't taken the coronation oath. And you've got a constitution unit trying to change that. So that's where you've got to keep your eyes on as well. So, this is, somebody sent me National Insurance, the Act and all the stuff that come off it. And I thought to myself, well, that's interesting. So I had a little tinkle and went through a few links, and I thought this were interesting. So it said, Lord Milner of Leeds, my lords, your lordships will be obliged to the noble Lord Strathclyde, for the clear exposition he has given of this bill. He has made it clear that it has two principal objectives. First, to double the contribution paid to the National Health Service by the individual, and to the extent to relieve the general taxpayer of an equivalent amount. How the hell does it do that if taxpayers paying tax and national insurance? But they can get away with that kind of talk because everybody's stupid. And secondly, to establish for the first time a separate health service contribution. If not, indeed, I'm not quite clear about this, a separate health service fund. Now, up until they invented this National Insurance Act in 1911, so this is before First World War, it was all charitable organisations and any big institution tied to the unions of industry, they'd also have their own charitable efforts for their employees and families, for medical, etc. So basically, the health of the nation was in the hands of the nation, right down to street level. Obviously, they had to change that, and they had the National Insurance Act of 1911. So, as we've just seen there, its intent was to fund this National Health Service. Now, it was optional to put into this National Health Service from 1911. It didn't really change until 1960s. To take the second purpose first, it is instructive to remember a little of its history of the National Health Insurance. Under National Insurance Act 1911, drought in, of course, by Mr. Lloyd George, the health service was provided as part of a general, though limited, social insurance system. Under the Act, the worker, the employer and the state each made a contribution, and the contributor was entitled to certain fixed benefits, which were provided by virtue of the premium or contribution paid. In those days, of course, prescriptions had not been paid for, they were free. Then, under the Act of 1946 brought in by a Labour government, there was no separate premium or contribution. The contribution was merged or included in a total payment under the National Insurance Act. The National Health Service Act made no provision for the contribution. So this is after the war. So this is when they relaunched it in a sense and really shoved it into our neck, while all the population of the time were still under major stress from having had to suffer the Second World War. Now, for the first time, there is to be a direct contribution in respect of the health service, imposing or doubling the liability upon the individual. And at the same time, the payment for prescriptions, which, as your lordships know, was introduced by this government and has since been considerably increased, is to continue. Okay, so this system, right, was entirely set up for the National Health Service and nothing else. Now, in the 1960s, they changed it again, and that made it compulsory that everybody had to contribute. It was optional before. So from 1960s, the change was made, everybody had to pay national insurance. So we pay for the NHS and have done since its inception. Look at what's happened to it. And now they're saying it's got no money. Right? So they're saying it's got no money. Let's have a look at this. So there we go. National insurance contributions, tax receipts in the United Kingdom from 2001 to 2021-22 in million. $156. But I'm sure that's billion actually. Tax receipts for national insurance contributions. Here we go. Tax receipts for national insurance contributions in the United Kingdom amounted to over 156.9 billion British pounds in 2021 to 2022, compared with 143.5 billion pounds in the previous year. These assholes are taking off us 156.9 billion and then telling us National Health Service is no good. Why can they do that? Oh, because the National Health Service today is in the hands of private trusts. Again, they've took what's ours and then dictate how it's used while taking 156.9 billion into their own hands. Can you see what I said last week? This is a wealthy nation, and that wealth is ours. It's only theirs when we hand it over to them. Why are we handing it over to them? Clearly, they're operating not for the nation, but for an invented debt which has given them a bankruptcy. Right? So that's your national insurance. For the NHS, they're telling you it has no money, they've had to privatise it, and now they're giving you nothing. Let's have a look at this. House of Commons Library. Tax statistics and overview. Published Tuesday the 21st of June 2022. Okay? This is our money. Public sector current receipts 2021 to 22, 916 billion. 916 billion pounds. Look, listen, are you listening to these figures? And we've no money. We've no money. Income tax, 228 billion per year. National insurance, this year, 161 billion, so it's above the one we've just looked at. VAT, 143 billion. Corporation tax, 66 billion. Capital taxes, 41 billion. Council tax, 40 billion, and I don't believe that for a minute. Fuel duty, 26 billion. Tobacco and alcohol duties, 23 billion quid. Business rates, 22 billion. Other receipts, 91 billion, and other taxes, 76 billion. And none of that is inclusive of all the fines, all the penalties, all the charges you're incurring through the judiciary and the private companies called the police. Yeah? Are you seeing this? This is how much money they're taking off us, 960, and telling us we're still in debt. They're telling us we're still in debt and pulling 916 billion, and that doesn't include all the judiciary and the police are bringing in. Come on, people. Maths. It's simple as maths. That's a lot of money, and we're getting nothing for it. Not a B. Yeah? And Bank of England's printing more money. Why? Why is it having to do that? Well, it's nothing to do with the fact that what we're paying, but it's got everything to do with this shenanigans on fake debt system they've got going on bankruptcy. Because that's where all our money goes, into that pot. And then they'll piss out a little bit for you if you're lucky. Well, I don't know about you guys, but I'm pretty... I'm vexed. I'm pretty vexed by that.